As we all know, the last two seasons of Game of Thrones really sucked. Many people in many videos have pointed out the many reasons why they sucked. For the most part, those reasons can be boiled down to the fact that the writers did not respect the world of Westeros and its inhabitants. Those last two seasons weren't consistent with the world we had become quite intimate with over many hours of television viewing, and for some of us, many hours of reading. We've lived with the inhabitants of Westeros through their worst and their best, and we've come to know them pretty well. The sad thing for me, in watching the last two seasons, was that you didn't even need to have a plot in mind to finish the story. Because here you have this world that is described in minute detail, and you have these characters who you understand better than most of the people you know in real life. All you had to do in order to write the last two seasons was to let the characters do their thing and see how it all turned out. And, of course, you needed to avoid magically teleporting your characters from one place to another. Westeros is big. People spend a lot of time traveling to get from one place to another. Think about Arya and the Hound just walking around for multiple episodes. Or Jaime and Brienne. Or Tyrion and Bronn. The time spent traveling wasn't wasted. It was important to building the relationships between characters. Most of the time I was watching, I'd forgot where all these characters were supposed to be going. Seeing the characters travel gives the audience a sense of the time that is passing, and it helps them to become embedded in the world. The first 6 seasons were great, truly great. It was just the last 2 that went completely off the rails and need to be simply forgotten. I am not going to talk about the last 2 seasons. They are banished from my brain. So, let's just start from the end of season 6 and allow the characters to do what we know they would do if they were real people and Westeros was a real place. I am going to start from the north and move south. Up north we have Bran and Meera. Remember Meera? We can start season 7 with them arriving at Winterfell. Sansa and Jon are overcome with emotion at being reunited with Bran, but they soon come to realize that he is not the person that he used to be. Also in Winterfell we have Davos, Tormund, Brienne, and Littlefinger. Arya is at the Twins, killing the Freys. The Hound is in the Riverlands with Beric Dondarrion, joining the Brotherhood without banners. At King's Landing we have Cersei, Jaime, Euron, Qyburn, and Ser Gregor, aka the Mountain. In Highgarden we have the Queen of Thorns, played by the incomparable Diana Rigg. In Old Town we have Sam Tarly, and Gilly. In Dorne we have Alaria and the Sand Snakes. Sounds like a band. And, of course, sailing out of Meereen, we have Daenerys, Tyrion, Varys, Grey Worm, Drogon, Yara, Theon, and a lot of horses. Dothraki, and the Unsullied. Big group of people. So, knowing these people the way we do, and understanding this world, what do you think will happen next? The first big question is, where is Daenerys going to land her forces? She has 3 major factors to keep in mind when she is making this crucial decision. 1. She wants to land as quickly as possible because a bad storm can destroy her entire force. And also, the Dothraki and the horses are getting restless. They're not used to boats. 2. She wants to land at a friendly port with sufficient supplies for her forces. A lot of mouths to feed. 3. She wants to land as close as possible to King's Landing. The first 2 criteria are satisfied by landing in Dorne. Dorne, however, is not all that close to King's Landing. That deficit is offset by the fact that the march from Dorne to King's Landing is mostly through friendly territory. The smart decision, really, the only practical and strategic decision, is to land in Dorne. The next closest territory on the east coast that is not controlled by Cersei is the Vale, and Daenerys does not have diplomatic relations with the Vale. And landing on an island off the coast would be just stupid for many reasons. Like, getting them enough supplies would be impossible, and they are useless on an island if anything were to happen to the Navy. So, we have her land at Dorne. After landing her forces, the next thing Daenerys would do is send Yara and her fleet to blockade Blackwater Bay. There is something that has always bothered me about the Game of Thrones, the books, and that is that George R.R. Martin does not care about battlefield tactics or for the art of war in general. For instance, in the first book, you hear that Robb Stark is supposed to be this brilliant battlefield tactician, but there are no detailed descriptions of his battle tactics. I mean, the kid managed to defeat the Lannister army and take Jaime prisoner. No small feat. George R.R. can go for pages describing all the meals at a banquet and go into great detail about the clothes people are wearing, but most of the battles in the books happen off screen, so to speak. When I was a kid, back in the 70s, I used to play Avalon Hill board games. These games were incredibly accurate recreations of actual famous battles that would take weeks to play. The current Avalon Hill games are nothing like the old ones. Historic battles, the old games were recreated down to the most minute detail. Whatever table you put the board down on was unusable for anything else for weeks. These were the ultimate nerd games back in the 70s, way nerdier than D&D. I mean, I love D&D, I played it all the time too, but not nearly as nerdy as Avalon Hill. George R.R. has a huge amount of nerd cred, but I'm guessing that he never played Avalon Hill board games. If he did, he would have gone into way more detail about the battles. Anyway, just paying attention to basic strategy. Dawn is the best place for Dany to land her forces. After landing, she picks up some Dornish troops and starts marching toward the Prince's Pass. Meanwhile, in Old Town, Sam cures Jorah's grayscale. The Mesas, they decide they need to send someone to Daenerys to represent them and to report back on things. Since Sam is the most adventurous and the most expendable of them, they sent him. And Jorah, of course, tags along, because, he's really crushing on Dany. Cersei, meanwhile, makes Euron the admiral of her navy, because he's got a navy. Euron, he sails out, confronts Yara's fleet, and destroys it because, he's such a badass. Theon, he dies bravely trying to protect Yara. He's got that character arc thing going on. He's got to redeem himself. He's real asshole, to be honest. But he tries to protect his sister, and then he dies. And Yara, she gets captured. Jaime, meanwhile, leads an army down toward Highgarden, hoping to use that castle as a defensive position against Dany's approaching army. That would be his best strategic move in these circumstances. And Arya, she hears that Jon is now king of the North, so she decides she's going to travel back to Winterfell. In Winterfell, Littlefinger, he starts plotting. You know Littlefinger. What he wants most of all is the Iron Throne. But that is a long way off. The first step in his scheme is to marry Sansa. Once they are married, he will be free to kill Jon Snow at some point in the future and become king of the North. He is thinking that sometime after that, years down the road, because, he's a long-term planner, he might get a chance to get the Iron Throne. He is a smart, patient man, one step at a time. He's not going to do anything stupid. The first step is simply to marry Sansa. The fact that she's dressing like a dominatrix both worries and kind of excites him. But his real worry is Bran. Bran is really creeping him out. So he decides he needs to have a talk with Bran and figure out what his deal is. As a peace offering, he presents Bran with the Valyrian steel dagger that was used as the attempt to kill him, years ago. Kind of a weird present, but, this is Littlefinger. Bran looks at him with his creepy, unblinking stare and says, "I see everything, all of the past, everything you have ever done. You are powerless here, because I see through all of your lies. all of your power comes from lies. I know that you want to marry Sansa and kill Jon. Right now, as I am telling you this, I can see that you want to kill me. And, chaos is a latter. Because Littlefinger is smart, he realizes that his life is in immediate danger. He has to kill Bran now. But then, Bran's eyes turn white, and he takes control of Littlefinger, forcing him to put the knife to his own throat. After holding it there for a few seconds, Bran has Littlefinger drop the dagger and releases the control over him. Littlefinger stares back at Bran in horror, realizing that he is indeed powerless in Winterfell, and does the only smart thing that he can. He bugs out. He gets the hell out of Dodge. And he heads to the only place that he can go to at this point, which is King's Landing. Alright, the next episode. Daenerys and her army are marching through Dorne to the Prince's Pass. Let's see, Jaime is taking his army down the Rose Road on his way to attack Highgarden. He is with Bronn, so that gives him someone to talk to. This is a travel episode. People are riding horses, talking to each other, doing exposition. We might even get some sexposition. I remember watching the first season, being amazed at how faithful it was to the book, and then being surprised seeing a sex scene that wasn't in the book. Then I realized that they were giving exposition to the story while having sex. Sex with exposition, sexposition. So, now, who do we know here who can provide sexposition in this episode? Let's see. How about Tyrion? Tyrion's kind of horny. And Alaria. Huh? They both hate Cersei. They have that in common. But Oberyn did die because he was defending Tyrion. And Alaria, she did kill Tyrion's niece. So there would be some major tension between the two of them. But you add in some wine, and I can see those two getting it on. I think, I actually think they kind of work as a couple. Think of it as horniness conquering hatred, which would be totally in character with both these guys. So, have them do some sexposition. And, let's see, also, we need to have some trouble with the Dothraki. We can see them, some of them, they might not be on board with, this whole civilized thing, and they rape and pillage some locals in Dorne, and then Dany has to burn them with the dragon. Let's see, to the northwest, we have Jorah and Sam. Jorah talks wistfully about Daenerys. Sam talks wistfully about Jon Snow, and they're bonding. Okay, Jaime and Bronn, they're traveling south. And, they have clever banter, because those two guys. They're bros. Bronn, ever the pragmatist, makes the suggestion to Jaime that they could defect to Dany's side, because she's got dragons. Jaime could make a surrender to Dany contingent on the two of them getting married. Can you imagine Jaime putting his moves, on Dany? I'm sure a lot of people would really, love to ship those two. Give them a name like Jamaris, Damie, something like that. And it would solve all of their problems. And Tyrion would be on board. Of course, ruining everything, Jaime would not betray Cersei, so that would never really happen. And matter of fact, Jaime tells Bronn casually that he could have him decapitated for treason. Bronn, being Bronn, says that being decapitated is probably a better way to go than being burned alive by a dragon. And, he'd make some cracks about Jaime's preference for blondes. You can't get much, blonder than Daenerys. But despite the talk, Bronn, of course, stays true to the cause of fighting against Daenerys with Jaime. But he does lament the fact that Jaime isn't nearly as practical as his brother Tyrion. Let's see. Arya's still heading north. There's not a lot going on between the twins and Winterfell. She's just traveling And Littlefinger is rushing to the White Harbor to catch a boat to King's Landing. And Jon makes peace with the lords who had joined the Boltons. By showing all these people traveling, we show the audience that time is passing. We have an understanding of where people are relative to each other in both time and space. Just like in the previous 6 seasons, which were good TV. Alright, next episode. I'm thinking we could probably get all this done in just 1 season. In this episode, we have some action. Jaime invades Highgarden, takes it over, and we get that great scene between the Queen of Thorns and the Kingslayer. We can keep that scene pretty much the same, with some minor dialogue changes. Diana Rigg is simply wonderful in that scene. And, here, we have a scene of the young Queen of Thorns in an upcoming Game of Thrones prequel. Yeah, I wish. Alright, so Arya makes it to Winterfell. There is a moving reunion now that we have 4, count them, 4 of the original Stark kids all together. I am really surprised that there are still 4 of them alive. They sit in the Great Hall together, discussing their next moves. Arya looks at Bran and says, you know everything. Tell us what to do. And he does. He says that Jon has to travel south and meet with Daenerys and bend the knee. Why, Jon? Simple. The fate of humanity depends on Daenerys joining them, and Jon is the one most likely to convince her. Jon at first is reluctant because he has a kingdom to run, but eventually he agrees to go down south and tell Daenerys that there's an army of the undead beyond the wall and that she is his queen. Arya decides to go south with him because if Arya loves anything, it's a good road trip, and she wants to kill Cersei. Ghost goes along for the ride. Remember Ghost? Meanwhile, Littlefinger arrives at King's Landing, where he tells Cersei that Bran has become a freaking god, and there's an army of the undead beyond the wall, and that Sansa's now dressing like a dominatrix. Cersei toys with him a bit, considers killing him, but then decides to let him advise her, because at this point, there isn't a lot of clever banter going on at the Red Keep. Next episode, the second battle for Highgarden. Dany arrives at Highgarden with her army. Jaime brought a bunch of scorpions to put on the walls in the hope that they would kill the dragons. They don't. The dragons destroy the walls, and the Dothraki kill everybody. Jaime grabs a lance and rushes at the dragon, and he gets burned to death. Because this is freaking Westeros, and if you do something stupid, you're gonna die. You might get resurrected, but first, you're gonna have to die. And since Jaime gets incinerated, he's not getting resurrected. He's dead. Get over it. Arya, Jon, and Ghost, up in the woods, up north, they get ambushed by a bunch of sparrows. And they kill a lot of the sparrows, but there are too many of them, and things start to look grim. But then, a huge pack of wolves rush in and kill the sparrows. The wolves are led by Nymeria, Arya's former pet. Ghost goes to greet Nymeria, and after looking back at Arya and Jon, the 2 wolves run off into the woods together, reunited at last. It's a tear-worthy moment, real tearjerker. Many tears. Let's see, Arya and Jon continue down the road, and, they meet with the Hound and Beric Dondarrion, because Beric was led to Jon by the Flames, which said that Jon was Azor Ahai, the Messiah who is going to save the world. So now, what is Cersei gonna do? Is she gonna sit in her castle drinking wine, hoping that her giant crossbows will kill the dragons? No, she is not going down that easy. She is not gonna become a simpering crybaby while her castle is destroyed around her. Hells no. Cersei is one of the greatest fictional villains of all time. She is gonna find a way to win. What Cersei does is she fills up a bunch of ships with jugs of wildfire and sails up north to the wall, because Cersei is up to some mischief. Meanwhile, Sam and Jorah catch up with Daenerys. We have a nice reunion. Dany makes Sam her maester because he saved Jorah. Sam is really moving up in the world. He's doing okay. After resting up a bit, the army starts marching to King's Landing. All right, next episode. Eventually, Dany's army makes a camp outside of King's Landing. While they're setting up, Jon and Arya and everybody else arrive at camp. Jon, as King of the North, he gets an audience with Dany. She meets him with her dragons, and she likes to meet people with her dragons because it makes a big impression. But she is surprised that the dragons like Jon, and and that night, there's an attraction. There's an instant attraction between the two young people. That night, they do the nasty, and the next day, the two of them fly around on dragons together. Meanwhile, up north, Cersei arrives at Eastwatch by the Sea. She fills up the tunnel in the wall with wildfire and then lights the fuse. Boom! The wall comes down, at least a section does. That's all you really need, just a section of the wall. The Night King, he walks alone over the rubble. Cersei and the Mountain go to meet him. The Night King has a dragon glass knife in his hand. Yeah, you know what that's for. The Night King reaches forward towards Cersei, and the Mountain, he goes for his sword because, he's protective. But then Cersei stops the Mountain. And the Night King, he plunges the dragon glass dagger into Cersei's chest. And she becomes, ta-da, the Night Queen. Then the army of the undead, they all come around. And, they kind of groan. That's what they do. They just, groan in reverence or whatever. Meanwhile, Bran, the three-eyed raven, he sees the wall fall in his mind. He is surprised. He didn't foresee this, He didn't see this happening. And he's kind of freaking out, as much as the three-eyed raven can freak out. And then his eyes go white. And he takes control of one of the dragons. The one that's not currently being ridden by somebody. So Dany, she sees her dragon just kind of fly away, and she kind of panics because, what the hell's going on? So she goes into pursuit of the dragon. And then Jon follows because, she is his queen. And they fly for hours. And eventually the possessed dragon, stops to drink some water, and maybe kill a cow. They eat a lot of cows. Dany and Jon stop and then carefully approach the dragon. And then Jon sees that the dragon has white eyes. And he knows what that means. He knows that Bran has taken over the dragon. And then the dragon starts flying again. And Jon and Dany once more go into pursuit. But a dragon without a rider can go faster than one with a rider. And it's not because, the weight. It's, person's like a little tiny thing on the back of the dragon. But it's because the dragon doesn't have to worry about the person falling off, And so, the dragon that's possessed, it's going a little faster. It kind of moves ahead. And that's the end of that episode. Okay, so next episode. Littlefinger, who basically runs King's Landing now, invites Tyrion to the Red Keep for a powwow. And Tyrion, who, never turns down an opportunity to talk, he agrees, and he brings Varys. They meet with Littlefinger at the small council table, and the conversation goes like this. Please sit down. Would you like some wine? I'll wait until the successful conclusion of our negotiations. Speaking of wine, where's my sister? I can't imagine she would turn down an opportunity to insult me to my face. She's busy running the kingdom, but I assure you, I have complete authority in these negotiations. You didn't assassinate her, did you? Because if you wanted to get on my good side, that would be the best thing you could do. I can assure you that I have not assassinated her. Pity. So, has she given you authority to surrender to us and open the gates? We do have all the advantages here. As far as I can tell, you only have 3 advantages. I believe your queen named them Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion. Without them, all you have is an army, and countless armies have fallen against these walls. Speaking of your three advantages, it is strange that we have not seen the dragons flying outside of King's Landing for several days now. I would think that, during negotiations, you would be displaying them prominently. They are resting up for the attack. If it comes to that, they will fly over these walls and burn your defenses to the ground. Your forces don't stand a chance. Really? Because we got a report that they were seen flying north at a high rate of speed, many miles away. One without a rider, followed by two with riders. Do you have an explanation for that? Sightseeing? She was keen on seeing more of her kingdom. As fun as it is to do this dance, let us be upfront with each other. We have a rare opportunity. Your queen is flying north, for some reason I'm sure you won't tell me. And, to be completely transparent, my queen left the city with several ships over a week ago, not telling me where she was going. So here we are, three of the smartest men in Westeros, in charge of the two largest armies in Westeros, with no king or queen to answer to. It sounds like you would like to present an offer. We join forces. We end this war, bring peace to the kingdom. When you say join forces, don't you really mean I should surrender my forces to you, and you become king? No, not at all. We form a council, we divvy up responsibilities, and we share power. As pleasant as it would be living here in the palace with you, I have to say that the Dothraki and the Unsullied are very loyal to their queen. If they even suspect that I am betraying her, they would not hesitate to remove my head from my neck. Pity! Gods! A single guard comes into their room behind Littlefinger. We have hired the Golden Company, and they are positioned outside the wall, behind your forces. At my command, they shall attack your army, pressing them up against the walls, which is currently swarming with archers. Without your dragons, the outcome is inevitable. I think I shall have that wine now. 4 advantages. What was that? Before you said we had 3 advantages. In fact, we have 4. We have the 3 dragons, and we have the best assassin in Westeros, who happens to be in the room with us as we speak. Littlefinger looks about in confusion, before focusing on the single guard in the room. The guard removes his face and is revealed to be Arya Stark. I was going to let you live, but then I found out what you did to Sansa. I couldn't very well let you live after that, now could I? What's the chance this wine is poisoned? Almost certainly. Pity, Arya, how long will it take for you to put on his face? We want to get to the gates before someone signals the Golden Company to attack. Not very long. Can I watch? All right, so in this episode, we had Tyrion and Littlefinger matching wits, doing what they do best. They were bluffing each other, feeling each other out, trying to get the advantage as they negotiated for the fate of the kingdom. What they were doing was playing the Game of Thrones. You know, it's what this is called, the Game of Thrones. And they were playing the Game of Thrones. And each one had an ace up his sleeve that he thought was going to give him victory. And here, we also had Arya doing what she does best. You know, she's an assassin. She's not a battlefield fighter. She's best sneaking around in palaces, silently killing people. It makes sense to have these characters do what they are supposed to be doing, because we are just letting them do what we know they would do. That's the way you write a story. So, anyway, now, in the South, everything is hunky-dory. Tyrion is basically running things. He and Sam send out ravens and try to find out what happened to Daenerys and Jon. Meanwhile, Jon and Daenerys are caught in a snowstorm up north, because, winter is here. They lose sight of the possessed dragon, but they see a long train of people and carts traveling down the road from Winterfell. So they land and they meet Sansa, and she tells them that Bran saw the wall crash down and that the army of the undead is now rushing toward Winterfell. Bran is staying behind in Winterfell to stop them with the help of the children of the forest, and he also has a dragon. So the storm now rages too strong for the dragons to fly. Suddenly, Benjen Stark, you knew he had to appear at some point. Benjen Stark appears, and he grabs Jon Snow, and they ride up to Winterfell because, Benjen can ride really fast in the snow. He's good at that. At Winterfell, they find Bran and the dragon and a bunch of children of the forest, and they're in the God's Wood. Where else would they be, right? And, Bran has now become part of the weirwood, and, the God's Wood itself is like overgrown with giant mushrooms and roots and vines and things, and there's some bears and some wolves, it's really kind of, magically gotten, wild, And then Bran says, I did not foresee Cersei bringing down the wall. The power of her rage hid it from me. Isn't it ironic? Hodor held the door to save me from the dead. Now I am Hodor. The Night King and Queen shall come here and kill me. I will kill many of them in return. They will be weakened. This will give you time to retreat and to ready yourselves for the attack. When they kill me, they shall break the world. Jon, it is your responsibility to fix the world again. So, Jon gets on Benjen's horse, and he goes back to the refugees. Dany is all pissed off, that Bran is killing one of her dragons, and gives Jon the cold shoulder. Ravens are sent down to Tyrion to bring the army to the Twins. That's where they're going to make their final stand, at the Twins. It makes sense, it's kind of like halfway between. It's like a choke point. It's strategically thinking. You say, hey, that's a choke point. So, the next episode. The Night King and Queen attack Winterfell, which is defended by the Children of the Forest, some animals, and a dragon. The defenders manage to kill a bunch of the undead because, the undead, they're dumb. But eventually, the undead do overwhelm the defenses and kill the dragon. The dragon bursts into flame, and when it dies, they're filled with toxic chemicals and stuff. So, they burst into flames, and you can't make an undead dragon. Because, no undead dragon. It's not going to happen. So the Night King and Queen face Bran. And Cersei can talk. We have an undead who can talk. Because she's the Night Queen. And she says that, hey, Bran, if you had just died when Jaime pushed you out of the window, none of this would have happened. And then, the Night King kills Bran. And, no more three-eyed raven. And then, meanwhile, Dany flies off to meet her army, and without Jon, and because she's still mad at him. And Jon and Sansa, they trudge through the snow with the refugees from Winterfell toward the Twins. Tyrion gets word about the fall of Winterfell and readies the army to move to the Twins to meet him. He makes a big speech. This is Tyrion. That's what he does. He makes a big speech to the gathered forces of humanity, appealing to them to work together to save the world. They got a big mission. So they march off, and then we have some exposition, maybe, between Brienne and Tormund, time to make monster giant babies, right? Next episode. Okay, now, so finally, the big battle episode. All right, the forces of humanity meet at the Twins. It is full-on winter. They've been saying that winter is coming for all these seasons, and now it is here. Jon Snow and Dany make up, for the sake of fighting off the undead. Things are still a little frosty between them, pun intended. Jon will ride one of the dragons, because the dragons like him. And they put together a reasonable battle formation. In front of the North Tower at the Twins. In the center of the line, you have heavy infantry, with the Unsullied forming the core. You have Dothraki cavalry on one flank. You have Westerosi knights on the other flank. And you got light infantry, like the Free Folk. They're positioned behind the heavy infantry, so they're there in reserve. And you have archers and trebuchets that are behind that. It's a reasonable battle formation. The dragons, they're going to try to fly behind the zombie army so they can, fry as many of these zombies as possible without having to worry about the human forces. But the storms, are kind of a problem. The storms are pretty heavy, and they're like a little worried about that. But they're going to do what they have to. So here comes the zombie army. All right, fast zombies. They're doing a Zerg rush. They slam against the heavy infantry, and the cavalry, comes in from the side in a pincher move. To do the pincher, classic pincher. And Dany and Jon, they're flying behind in the rear. And they managed to get some passes in, and they burn a lot of zombies. And at first, things are looking pretty good for the humans, But then the horses, they're like freaking out, because there's all these undead. And the cavalry kind of gets into disarray, a little chaos, and then big wind gusts, batter the dragons, and the dragons have to crash land. And Dany manages to land behind the Dothraki, and then Jon lands in front of the tower. And the White Walkers on zombie horses, they charge through the remaining front line of the Unsullied. And then Grey Worm gets cut down, he dies. And Jon's dragon burns some of the charging White Walkers, but one of them gets through and plunges a sword into the dragon's belly. As the dragon knocks the White Walker away, the Night King rushes on his horse, and he plunges a sword into the dragon's chest. As the dragon swings its head around to try to bite the Night King and eat him, the Night King swings his sword into the neck and chops the dragon's head off. So Jon falls off the dead dragon. And as Jon is trying to recover himself, he sees the Night King doing his thing. His thing. He's raising his arms, and the Unsullied start to come back to life, and all the people who died, they become undead. So Jon tries to move toward the Night King, but he's blocked by a bunch of newly undead. And at this point, everything seems to be lost. It's all very, what are we going to do now? We're all going to die. And then that's when Jon Snow goes Super Saiyan. Okay? He's Azor Ahai. He's the Messiah. He's like the fire Messiah. And you can see him get the strength, and the sword becomes covered in flames, and he gets, he's feeling it. He's feeling the power of Azor Ahai. So he cuts through the undead like butter. And soon he's fighting the Night King himself. It's an epic battle. Boom. Who's going to win? They're fighting hard. And then some other zombies will come in behind Jon, but, he swings around and just, cuts them in half, and they burst into flame because, he's Azor Ahai. He's a badass. And then, eventually, Jon strikes the Night King. And then the Night King bursts into flames, and the Night King is dead. But the rest of the undead, they don't die. Because the power of the undead has been moved to the Night Queen. All right? And she and the mountain have gone to where Dany is. And Cersei, she points toward Dany, and she screams, like an undead kind of scream. And all the undead, at her command, rush toward Dany, and they overwhelm the Dothraki between, Cersei and Dany. And they swarm on top of the dragon, and they start stabbing at the dragon. And then Dany falls off the dragon, and the mountain moves in to kill her. But then Jorah, he comes out, and he blocks the mountain's path. And then the mountain kills Jorah. But now the Hound comes in, because, Clegane Bowl, right? We had to have Clegane Bowl. They've been kind of hinting at that for years. So we have the Clegane Bowl. Drogon, he's covered with undead who are hacking at his body, tearing at his wings. He's not looking good. He's not looking good at all. So then Cersei, she pulls out a dagger and she moves in to finish Daenerys, who's like semi-conscious on the ground. But then the nearly dead Drogon raises his head in one big, burst of strength and bathes both Dany and Cersei in dragon fire. As we know, Dany is immune to dragon fire. But Cersei, she starts to burn because it would be stupid to have an undead zombie mage be immune to dragon fire. Everyone knows that fire is the biggest weakness of the undead. To have any undead be immune to the most potent fantasy fire source known would be just silly. So Cersei burns to a crisp, and the undead fall. And the battle is over. Yeah. Let's see who survived. We have Jon Snow, we have Daenerys, we have Brienne and Tormund. We have Tyrion, Varys, and Sam, and Sansa and Arya, they survived. And Davos and Meat Pie. Those are the important ones. The Hound and the Mountain, they killed each other, as we all knew they would. In the final episode, we have people mourning the dead, and Dany is sad, about her dragons, and then Jon has to comfort her, and then they get it on. Sam knows that Jon is Dany's nephew, but he doesn't say nothing about it. Why would he? He makes a couple of references to it sometimes, just to amuse himself. One time Arya says that, Jon really was good with those dragons, and Sam will say something like, it's almost like he's a Targaryen or something. yeah, he amuses himself. And then it all ends with a big wedding. We get to see all the survivors without any mud or blood in their hair and clothes. They're all cleaned up. Dany and Jon, they will rule the kingdom. Aunt and nephew. Targaryens marrying and ruling just like it's been for 1,000 years. But this time, it's a new age of humanity, since all the magical creatures have been killed. And a new religion arises around Jon and Dany, since they're basically demigods, and they saved the world. I'd worship them if I lived in Westeros, looking at all the different gods, like the water god, I'm not going to worship the water god. That's I'd worship Jon and Dany. They're wonderful people. Sansa, she's the Lord of the North, but she never marries. She gets plenty of suitors. People coming up there, but she decides she's not really into dudes. Arya, she marries Gendry, and their kids, they go on to continue the stock line. And since Jon and Dany can't have kids, it's Arya's kids who eventually ascend the Iron Throne. Tyrion is the Hand, Illyria is his mistress, Sam is the head maester at King's Landing. We have good people. We have good people running things. Bronn gets High God. Oh, wait a minute. Nope. Bronn, now he's dead. He died at the Second Battle of High God, and he got burned to death by a dragon. And there's Varys. He's still there. He's still being creepy. And the end. So, in conclusion, I would just like to say that as a fan of many fictional worlds, I have a respect for their existence, and they do have an existence of sorts, in the minds of millions of fans like myself. These worlds have an existence, they make sense. I see them as places that make sense, in their own way. I see the characters in them as real people, placed in extraordinary circumstances. I can relate to these people because, they behave as perhaps, I would think that I might behave if I found myself in one of these remarkable worlds. And I ask, any writers out there, if you're given this rare privilege to write for these worlds and these characters in these worlds, please, just please, do so with respect for the shared mythology of the millions of fans. Write like these worlds actually exist, because, they do exist, in the hearts and in the imaginations of us, of all of us, So, please, respect these worlds. Thank you.